Forestry Committee. This is my fourth term, but my first time in that committee. And at this point, I really like it. It's a committee, there's only 4 of us in there. There are 4 Democrats, 1 independent, and 3 Republicans. So it's kind of a 50-50, and it's very nonpartisan, which I really like as compared to the committees I've been in the past. And we really talk about just the issues, forestry issues, and agricultural and forestry issues, and politics is out of it. So it's really enjoyable at this point, and I hope it stays that way. That's it.
Hi, Michael Morgan, my 3rd term in the House. My committee's House Government Operations and Military Affairs, so it's a good fit for me with 38 years in the military, plus a lot of municipal experience with what we do. I'm also, I'll talk about that in a second, also on the House Ethics Panel with Chris Taylor. We're the 2 from our caucus on that panel of 5 people. Yeah, 5 of us. No, 1, 2, yeah. And that panel is essentially if there are any ethical complaints against members in the House, they get we're kind of like a panel that does a review of that and then make recommendations. Tied to that, and I'll come back to the piece of my committee, is last year in my committee, we passed a very comprehensive ethics bill, came out of there, and it was subsequently passed out of the House and Senate. And already, like a lot of bills, sometimes after they go out there, people look at them and point things out. They're like, ooh, could have tweaked that, should have done this. So there's already H1, literally was the first bill that was introduced, as a bill proposing to exempt that panel from the requirement to consult with the executive director of the State Ethics Commission because of some of the confidentiality in it. So it's a thing that makes sense, but it was an oversight so the bill gets refined over time. Going back to my committee, just real quick things we do. So a lot of municipal law things such as town charters. For instance, town of Milton has a charter. Last session, I helped usher in one of my constituent towns of South Hero to get their charter, first charter put in place for them. A big reason they did it is because they wanted to implement a local option tax, which allows them to put a 1% tax on certain goods and services that are sold within the confines of their towns, not everything. We also have under our purview in my committee, Department of Liquor and Lottery, so everything liquor-wise through the 802 stores, as well as the lottery program in general, and there's several components to that could go into, but we won't at this point. And we also, regardless of where you stand on it, we oversee all the stuff that has to do with the cannabis world. And with that, I'll shut up. That's enough, I think.
Larry Luby, I'm a homeowner in Milton, taxpayer. I'm retired, and I'm a Republican.
Yes.
Go ahead, Chris.
So if anybody gets cold, let me know. I turn the heat down because it was super hot. Now it's really cold.
It is cold.
Is it cold?
Yeah.
So we can open it up to questions, concerns that people have.
I just want to say, this is a great lineup. I love it. Everybody won their elections, and Tony especially, the first time he ran, he wins. It was great. It was a great election. I'm so happy.
Thank you.
I hope we can live up to it.
We'll try not to disappoint.
Yeah.
Chris, I'm definitely here to hear about the education bill, so I would love for you or anybody else who knows something about that to give us an update.
It's I can do my best.
And one of the things that I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I'm really curious if there's any movement on the proposal for 5 districts and what that looks like.
Yeah, there's a lot. And we've been kind of operating a little bit without a lot of detail right now. We're slowly starting to get detail. Yesterday we just got a little bit more detail, or actually a lot more detail on what the foundation program is going to look like and what the recommended base number is, which is 13,200, and there's still the weights that will be added on top of that. So it's been trying because of the lack of total detail in in the plan right now, but as far as the 5 districts, that is the proposal. The reasoning that I've heard behind that proposal, couple of different things. First of all, it's a natural way that superintendents right now kind of break up their regions. So they're used to this larger, these larger areas working together to solve problems. The other part of that is the administration and the Agency of Education realizes that with bigger districts, there's more equity of voice. Towns have to communicate with other towns that might be on a different socioeconomic level and come up with a budget together using all of their facts and figures instead of possibly one town who typically says yes all the time, no matter what the raise in the budget is. So it's more of a voice and an equity in that. And I don't know where we're gonna land on it. I have guesses. My guess is that we're not gonna land on 5. It'll be a higher number. But we'll see. Like I said, that information's kind of coming out, and then when we do get the information, that's when the committees, the Senate Ed Committee and the House Ed Committee can actually start to look at policy. As everybody knows, education is so interconnected with absolutely everything else in the state that you move one domino and the rest can fall, right? So it's gonna be long, drawn out conversations to try to figure out the path forward.
Just a further comment. As you well know, what it looks like today, 2 weeks, 3 weeks from now, it may be completely different, so it's still gearing up, as he indicated, and who knows?
I was just gonna wonder, I was going to ask about the free school lunches, because that did get mentioned as we're going to exclude children from that based on their parents' income. And I was hoping I could get a commitment from you that, at least an agreement that all children deserve to be fed regardless of their parents' income. Because like, somebody could be making all the money in the world and still decide, oh, well, I want my child to just like, I think my child's too fat or whatever, or bad body image issues. Or I think I should restrict my child's food in some way. There's also a lot of community that's involved around eating together and sharing food. And for all children, all students to be offered the same food, regardless of what their parents' income is, regardless if they're wearing like hand-me-downs or the like latest fashion or whatever, for them all to be able to eat the same food at the same time and everything is very just like important to both their development as well as their building empathy and understanding between them. So I would like to get a commitment or at least an agreement that, yeah, that is something that's important.
I can absolutely agree that it's something that is important. I mean, I work in the school system and I see how being hungry and hunger affects students' ability to learn and just even socialize. I did vote for the universal school meals. I know it's on the table again. I'm gonna look at all the information that comes forward again and make another decision based on what comes forward. For full transparency, when I did vote yes on universal school meals, I actually, I got a lot of constituent feedback that wanted me to go in that direction. And I was, I work in schools, but I was more in the line of raising subsidy levels and the FPL levels to more come in line with missing that, or getting that missing middle that was there, that higher economic families to be able to still pay for their meals. So I'm gonna look at everything as it comes through. I'm not saying I'm gonna vote yes, I'm not saying I'm gonna vote no. I think there's gonna be a lot more information that come out. I'm glad that the cost of it was much lower than actually I first anticipated. I think that's a great thing. I think it was several $1 million, maybe $10 million lower than first.
Is it federally subsidized at all?
Yeah, it did.
It's 17.
Are the school meals federally subsidized at all, or is it all local taxes?
That's a great question. I think there's still some federal
There's still some
involvement in it.
federal involvement.
Don't think we can count on that continuing.
That was
Yeah. No, and that's,
That'll probably be
so,
the next
and that
one.
is like, right now, one of the really big problems with this whole education thing, where there's a lot of uncertainty, right, with federal funding. And if federal funding does go away, we're gonna find ourselves in a really, really awful situation on stuff, so. So that's part of the conversation that we've been having as well. Things are changing every day, right? You're hearing one thing, and then that goes away, and then you have to react to another thing, and then that goes away. So it's really hampering the conversation right now, because we're, so anyway, I'll stop talking.
Yeah, I'm in the same position as Chris. I was there last year, I voted for it. However, some of the same caveats he said, I think everything has to be on the table, and up to and including, I've had constituents reach out to me to go, I don't need you feeding my child, and I'd rather you not. So I've literally had people on the other side of the coin say, they go, I am quite capable, I want to. So I think you have to leave, as kind of Chris alluded to, everything on the table. It is important to feed kids. I don't wanna see kids go hungry, I don't think any of us do. But I think everything has to be looked at, and does it become a scalable thing possibly to, as we try to find ways to, because y'all saw what happened last year with property taxation, and that didn't directly drive it necessarily, but everything's, the death by 1,000 cuts, everything's additive. So I'm not saying yes or no right now, I'm sort of the same answer as Chris, but I did originally support that, and we'll see where things go.
We've had testimony in our committee, and many of the things that were said were pretty much in line with what your feelings are. So I've yet to see a little more and read a little more about it. I wasn't there the last 2 years, so I didn't get to vote one way or the other, but I'm leaning in the direction of a yes, unless it's something that the state feels or appropriations or that we just can't afford.
I mean, for me, I'm a freshman here, I haven't learned, I'm still learning how all this stuff works. For me, it's a matter of how's it gonna be funded. I'm one of these people where if it helps the people and there's no reason we shouldn't, yeah, I'll go for it. But there's so many different moving parts on all this. I've not seen the bill myself. I'm not saying I would absolutely say yes, but I would be willing to say yes if everything is funded properly and to me, where's the money gonna come from? I'm a realtor. I work in foreclosures, so I see firsthand some of the stuff that people go through. So I completely understand where you're coming from, some of the things that these people are going through, but we need to be careful, because if we make things too expensive, we're gonna see even more foreclosures, and I don't want that to happen.
Fortunately, the program was really benefiting our farmers, and it was a really cohesive back and forth that benefited. Not having it, there will be all these additional expenses of who gets it, who doesn't, and the admin, and also the stigma against the children who are standing there being singled out. It doesn't.
My children are now eating vegetables that they wouldn't eat when I eat it. I don't know how that
No, this is great. I mean, this is why we're here.
That's why we're here.
We work for you, and if this is a concern for you, I'm gonna vote yes.
Yeah, I would buy more green beans.
There used to be a program in the middle school where they would have one day a week, they would make something like totally out of the norm, and have the students vote on it, if they would eat it again, and if they voted yes, they would introduce that into the menu. There's.
It's an excellent way to
Call it the
kids to
Steve Marinelli effect, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Love that guy.
Right, what she was
If I can just throw out a quick example, because I know people have talked about that, some constituents have said, well, I don't want you feeding my kid. I work in a different district. I've worked in the Milton district, right now work in a different district. Usually those people are gonna send their kids with their own meal. But let me give you an example of, we got notification this week in the district I work in, and one of the students, a kindergarten student, unfortunately whose grandmother was dying from gout. And the mother, we really appreciated it, reached out to the whole team and said, listen, if he's off, you know, please. But one thing that happened is this kid that always brought his lunch from home, the parents were able, because the mom was dealing with, you know, what she needed to deal with, he had school lunch, and they didn't have to think about it. They just said, we reached out to the team, this is the deal. And, cause I said to him, oh, you gonna go get your lunch? He's like, no, I'm having school lunch today. He never has school lunch. But that was there for them, that, you know, boom.
And and we can come back to the school meals if we want to, but,
I would actually like to know what my, senator and representative feel about this before we move on. That's okay.
I'm on the same page, I'm new, like Tony said, I'd like to hear all sides. My granddaughter benefits from it, my son is single, and he does benefit from it, but I would have to listen to all taxpayers. I would have to listen to what percentage to make a good decision, but of course, my granddaughter benefits from it, so, and a lot of Milton kids benefit from it, but as a representative of all Vermonters, I have to listen to everything that's on the table.
Yeah, and I'll just say I was probably one of the ones in Milton that didn't vote for it because I saw the writing on the wall with the property tax issue. And at the time when we were voting on it, it was probably in that $27 to $30 million range. And not having that upper limit on income is one of the biggest reasons why I couldn't support it. You know, feeding children where their parents make absorbent amount of money, and we have other.
Taxes, I'm sorry.
Would you like to answer the question for me, Mom?
Yeah.
It's just, we're paying for that, we're all paying and contributing.
Yes, and you know, when I was growing up, I took a cold lunch all the time, would have hot lunch every now and again, whatever it was. But I saw the overall impact and, you know, the unfunded mandates we always hear about. It was $30 million at the time. And now over the program coming in, you see what the utilization is, and I think that's why a big part of it is that it's come down to 17 million. So I'd be curious to see what the outset of that program is and what the utilization is going to be in the future, because, you know, I agree 100%. I don't want any child to be hungry at school, but it's also, you know, up to the parent, if they have the means to be able to do it, to be able to make sure that their kids are well fed. And if there's circumstances where that isn't happening, I feel like those children go to the school and be able to be fed, because in the case that you were talking about where somebody made a phone call and said, hey, I don't have cold lunch today, they're having hot lunch, and you were there to step in, boom, going right through. You know, it's things like that. And, you know, when I was in school, I was probably the last one to go through school out of us. I never knew who had money and who didn't have money growing up. I didn't know who had free or reduced lunch growing up. I had no idea.
Do you know the process of how a youngster is recognized that they need a free lunch? Do you know the process?
With their income limits of their parents?
Yeah. Do you know who has to make that decision?
Parent writing the form down?
Pardon?
Parent writing the form down? I have to do it for childcare.
Yeah, well, this becomes pretty evident in the school system that who are the poor kids and who are the ones who don't. So I think if you want to put kids on the level playing field, there's some things that you have to do. And unfortunately, with the homeless situation we have in this state right now, it's more crucial that these youngsters have a lunch.
Absolutely.
And some of them get up in the morning and have nothing.
Absolutely, yeah.
You know, you watch on television the ads that you see of kids around this country and in this country, because I get lots of information in my mailbox of kids who need support. So we don't need to identify more kids that are poor. That's a real issue. And it comes down to the administration, and you have to look at that, and then the people in the cafeteria get that information, and they somehow have to make sure that the kids who qualify for that have a ticket or something.
I'm told you have a key card.
So you need to know, and you get to understand what the process is. And sometimes when you're in Montpelier, if you don't have that knowledge, you really don't know exactly how you're gonna vote.
Yeah, from the testimony I received, they have a system where all kids who get hot lunch have a card. So you have no idea when that child swipes the card if they're getting that lunch for free or if they're paying for that lunch through their parents. You have no idea.
In the Milton school system, it's a
Code.
Or they have a POS system where they can, like, the student says their name and they get verified through a picture and the person just hits the button. But, so, yes, and so this, I just wanna point out, these are the conversations we're gonna have down in the State House. This is a very contentious topic, and this is what's gonna play out down in the State House as well. But yes, go ahead.
Well, I think I'm probably a little bit older than you, Chris. I try very hard not to look it, but yeah, I'll be 41 next month. And I think I'd like to challenge you on the idea that you didn't recognize which kids were more financially well off. I remember very clearly which kids got to bring Dunkaroos and lunch bowls to school, and who had like a really nice lunchbox, and who didn't, who had the store brand everything. I remember it, and I mean, maybe you don't, maybe you truly were just focused on your own lunch, but I think a lot of kids did recognize who had like the cool foods, the trendy food.
It just didn't affect me the same way, I guess.
Students,
I think that's been going on for a very long time.
Yeah, I don't know what the cool one is right now.
I think, and just in general, students are more apt to know somebody's economic level by just the shoes that they wear, or the clothes that they come in, or the, so it's a very hard topic, for sure. I haven't forgotten about you, Martin. Can we just go to Martin here, and then if we need to talk more about health?
I got a question about, when you go to these 5 districts or more for school now, will the teachers' contracts will be negotiated as one set in those districts?
Those are the details we
Yeah.
haven't even gotten.
Yeah, because for me, I
Right, so,
think,
but that's absolutely
yeah,
something.
because I'm a big proponent of a statewide teachers' contract, because I think it'd be better for everybody, but districts like that, I think that'd be a great idea, because that way you wouldn't have one school board going up against, as I say, someone told me, the school board changes every few years, but people negotiate for teachers, they don't, they're experienced negotiators, so it'd be nice having that one district, all the schools will negotiate for that one district.
So the governance part of this, the Agency of Education's information on the governance part of this is supposed to come out this coming week. This last week was more the financial, the foundation formula. Next week it's gonna be more of the governance, and that's some of the conversation we're about to start having.
That'd be a thing great if everything was negotiated at one district at once, rather than individual schools themselves. I think it'd be better for teachers and for the taxpayers too.
Yes.
I had a question about the finance part. There's governor's proposal having one-time input from the general fund of $77 million into the education fund. That's a one-time this year. What are we assuming that that's going to be something that will be available the year after that?
No, I would.
And what would we do in case those funds are available?
I would assume that that's not gonna be available next year. That's the way I always assume when it comes
And
to.
so when you go from the general fund, who's it going to help? How's it going to help?
To make up that 77 million, I think that's part of the urgency to make some changes. Because we're not gonna have $77 million every year to throw in as a buy down.
Yeah, it's
for what's occurring, so I think that's part of the urgency of trying to make some changes to stabilize. And everything that I've heard so far, that I've heard the governor and the Agency of Education talk about, that this is not really these aren't really changes focused entirely on cost cutting at all. It's about student outcome that has the benefit of some efficiencies in it and stabilization of the ed fund for future years.
Yeah, I think the way to look at it too is the intent. And correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, because again, you're a little more the subject matter expert, but is to get rid of some of the sticker shock from last year, is to help buy down some of the potential of Commissioner Bolio's increase, correct?
Yeah, I think it's also an incentive for school districts to really look hard at their budgets this year.
In addition
to try to keep it as level funded as possible in order to get that additional buy down. There was an incentive to it. So.
Chris, I just read something published by the Education Department that the new bill is gonna save $180 million. And I think we need to see where those savings are coming from.
Yeah.
Because that's a huge amount of money that supposedly they're gonna save.
Right, and
And the question, the other question is, how did they come up with the foundation formula?
The first one, I'll let you help with the foundation formula, but the first question, you and I had a little bit of an offline conversation before this about, the savings, and, you know, quite honestly, I think some of the savings is gonna come in with, reduction in staffing, on certain levels. You know, I don't think there's any way other to look at it, and I'm hoping that that's through attrition. But when you start consolidating into bigger districts, you don't need some of the, you won't need a superintendent in every single district in all 119 districts in the state. And so that's where I think the $186 million savings, some of it, not all of it. And it's hard to quantify, right? It's hard to quantify where the cost savings are gonna come from, especially at this point, because there's so much detail that we still have to figure out.
The point I wanna make though is that you may reduce the number of superintendents, but there are gonna be other people that are gonna have to fill those slots. There's no way that one superintendent, for example, in the, with the Champlain Valley, can manage all the school that he has under his or her supervision.
Yeah, there's other states that have, way fewer school districts than we do in a higher student population, so I think a lot of it was looking at how they're modeling things. There's a Picus Auden report that came out, and they're kind of the gold star, company that looks at all this education throughout the United States and comes up with these, and I think that's where a lot of the foundation formula
Yeah,
came
so
up from.
foundation formula, AOE contracted with, is it ASC? APA, who does, that's their work, is they work on foundation formulas, school funding, things like that. And they went back and looked at all the previous studies that the legislature has asked for. They looked for this Picus Otis one, and they came up with a foundation formula for the state of Vermont and added in things that directly affect Vermont, and added in like weights that we have that we recently changed. So that's how you have a base foundation amount, and then on top of that you will have different weighted amounts for your students depending on your population. So that's kind of the rundown we're getting right now. Very high level, still a ton of details to come on that. You know, the implementation of it, what the actual numbers are gonna be. And I think what everyone up here is waiting to see is, how does it affect my district? What does this change mean for my district? And go from there, because there's still a lot of work left to do.
The information that, one of the big takeaways I took away yesterday was, Agency of Education said Vermont is still going to be one of the highest spending states on education, even after all of this would be, if all of this would be implemented, we would still be one of the highest.
Is that per capita or just in general?
Great question, I don't know.
Okay, that seems an important distinction.
I think raw number,
I'll look it
just
up.
raw amount.
And with the.
Level funding, just on the topic of level funding, I'm wondering how healthcare costs play into that, because that's one of the driving factors last year, and I would ascertain that it would be essentially impossible for any district to have level funding, given the cost in healthcare costs rising. So I guess Representative Steady, I'm wondering, given your committee position, if you've been discussing healthcare costs and how to keep those.
We're doing Medicaid right now, age 13.
So,
but not
is there any kind of
overall
legislation
healthcare.
being proposed to control healthcare costs?
We haven't got there yet. We're doing Medicaid only right now, and trying to put the bill that's come to my committee on Medicaid is to increase Medicaid services. That's all I've learned so far.
But that is a huge topic, even in the education committee, we've been talking about that, and that's not our purview, but because of that's a huge driving factor of budgets. So, you know, I'm not sure how that's all gonna work out, but it is a conversation we're having for sure. It's huge.
Cause it seems like it's integral, it's an integral part of the conversation, because there's no way to control school spending if we don't keep healthcare costs from rising 14%.
Yes.
Yes, I want to direct that to Chris because I know that we used to work for the same company, and yeah, I know you know healthcare finance from both as a provider and as a payer. You know, what do you think can be done to help control those costs? Because those are pretty much fixed costs for employers, and they have very little leeway in how to change those. With education funding, we are the employers. We are the taxpayers. How do we, do you have any thoughts on how that's going to be?
Yeah, for me, I've worked in different things. Administering claims is basically, where I used to work. You might still work at it.
I still do work.
Nice. And then I've also seen like the healthcare side of it, working at the hospital in finance as well. So I've been on both sides of the coin. And the biggest thing for me is that you can have different plans available. You can have different splits on what your premiums are, how much your employer is going to pick up. I don't know for certain what the schools across the state really have for health insurance, but looking at it different ways, I signed on to a bill that would increase the limit on the certificate of need from $1 million to $10 million. That way, what I've seen over the years is people would put in a certificate of need to be able to open up a new clinic. The surgery center down in Colchester, that hit many roadblocks because the medical center would try to stop it every time they could. So by increasing that limit to 1 to 10, you can be able to create more opportunities, more competition in the marketplace that would then drive down pricing for all. We had a presentation, very high level, nitty gritty about how healthcare works in the state of Vermont in the finance committee that I sit on, and that was just general introductions, how it all works, because what we kind of have is we have the Green Mountain Care Board that regulates the hospitals and what they can charge. You have DFR that kind of works with the health insurance companies, and everybody's asking for increases all over the place. Blue Cross, Blue Shield, double-digit increases, the hospital asking for increases. So we really have to make it more affordable and also look at the plans and the costs that impact employers that are funded by taxpayers to see how that all interplays.
I think probably, in my opinion, we need more competition here in Vermont for health insurance.
For health insurance and,
we only have MVP and Blue Cross.
We have a duopoly.
I also think we should look at how the state determines what the healthcare plans for schools are. It doesn't seem to be
Without a doubt.
choosing what's going to cost less.
Yeah, and there's outside forces
Yep.
involved in
100%.
that. I'm sorry, I totally lost track of who, but Mary Ann first
Just
and
to
then
bring
Martin
it up,
after.
the Green Mountain Care Board, do we really need them? I assume they make money, they get paid, I have no idea how much.
They do get paid.
But
They're
they
paid
give in
executive
to
board.
these
It's a
insurance
6-digit
companies
figure, I
you
think it's like
know?
130,000.
all the time,
Yeah.
it's ridiculous.
Not here.
They don't seem to wanna say no.
I hear you there too.
I got a quick question now. Does each school district have its own healthcare plan, or is it one big statewide plan?
I believe it's a statewide plan, and that was supposed to save money, and that did not get to
I
fruition.
think about the Green Mountain Care Board. I met the doctor who's head of the plastic surgery unit down here at the hospital. He said they're the biggest, they cause more problems than they're worth. That's the surgeon, the head of the plastic surgery. He said it's just a pain, they just cause more problems than they're worth. From the doctor.
So,
Yes.
I don't know if you remember me, Chris, but
I do. We
okay.
met over at ABC Academy.
We did. And so I work at the hospital with his wife in different areas. I'm a cardiac nurse, and Brenda, you might remember I called you and had a little feeling
Thank you.
sesh.
It's nice
Yeah.
to put a face, thank you, and it was very nice talking to you.
Yeah, you too. And I feel so conflicted on the Green Mountain Care Board. And on the one hand, I think that there's a potential to do a lot of good. UVM is
doing some pretty shady stuff. We charge $600 for the same x-ray that costs $100 at CVPH. It's the same equipment, the same picture. Why is it so much more expensive? And yet, on the other hand, if the hospital makes more money, then we can widen the services we have, hire more people, pay our staff better, increase retention, because UVM does offer some really phenomenal things within the cardiac area anyway. It's like super exciting. I will geek out after anyone wants to talk about cardiology. And so like, I want that to continue. I want us to keep doing really cool things to make people live great lives. And also, I don't want it to become something that nobody can afford. And I don't have the answer, which is why I'm not in your seats. And I don't know. I'm so conflicted by it because yes, they need to get a grip. I don't know that anybody needs multi-million-dollar bonuses. Just get a trophy and say you won capitalism. And yet also we need that money to do the research and really cool stuff like the My Pacer trial where we're doing really cool new stuff with pacemakers. I don't know. I have so many feelings. I don't have an answer.
But what you just said is super important, right? Because I think I have the same thoughts on the Green Mountain Board. I'm conflicted. There's pros and cons to almost everything we have to make decisions on. And that's going to be huge looking at that. So, and I was going to say I'm glad I'm in education, but yes, Larry.
Thank you, Rick Keller. As those of you who are in committees that deal with education funding know, there was a diagram put out the other day, and with your permission, I'd just like to hand it out to people who may or may not have access to that diagram.
Sure. When was it?
It's proposed funding. It says leaders of the Vermont Agency of Education laid out the governor's education transformation proposal and presentations to House and Senate committees on January 30th and 31st. And it came from ET paper.
As long as it's the most recent information, because things are changing.
You can tell me if it's not,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it was hot off the press late last night.
I think that is probably the most recent. I just hate to have something out there that's 2 steps back from where we are now. It's changing something.
I got another quick question. Why do we only have 2 insurance companies in Vermont? Medical insurance, I mean.
Size of the marketplace.
Huh?
Size of the marketplace.
Is it regulations have anything to do with it, or?
No, just overall size of the marketplace.
Well, isn't United Healthcare in Vermont? Because isn't that what IBMers have?
Think
Or is that
didn't
only
you-
retired?
IBM's gone. They left, I had to get.
Well, I know they are.
I have them privately.
Okay.
Well, that's from bigger.
They weren't good anyway.
No, they
Yeah.
were. It just $1,000 bill.
So, as far as the education financing, and I wish I wasn't able to print it out this morning, but there is on line 25 page, more of an explanation for the foundation formula, and it gives a lot of the detail on it. It gives a lot of detail on the reasoning behind a lot of it, but it also, see it, Brenda. It also talks a little bit more about the weighting as well. And I forgot what they said. Yeah, so the weighting is still going to be very significant funding for students within the district. I think they said if you're an EL student, English language learner, then you can add another $10,000 on top of the base. I think it's 9,000 something. And if you're an EL, and it's gonna, so if you're EL and a low income student, I think it's like $43,000 it turns into financing for that student. So those weights really mean a lot when you're looking at a $13,200 base. The weights are really gonna be significant in this formula.
And can those funds be allocated to any area within the district spending? Like, could that surplus $30,000 be applied to like a capital improvement, or does it have to be for like an EL teacher and other supports?
So the funding will go to the school district, and then the school district will determine where those funds are spent. Kind of like what we were doing with the reform of special education, the funding, going to the census block grant, being able to send a block of money and being able to reduce the administrative burden and being able to teach, instead of a 1-to-1, it might be a 1-to-5, because that's it's better for the students that way, and being able to have that flexibility. So the money will be determined based on the weights, and then the school itself will determine how it's spent.
And what are the accountability measures in place then, to make sure that it's being
I think it's
properly?
the same that it is now.
I
think these are all,
Task force?
On the school level, I think it would be
Yeah.
the same that it is now because if they're given, like the census block grant for special education, they have certain outlined, uses for that, right? There's more flexibility in it right now, but there's still, it has to go for special education services first before it can be used for maybe a 504 or something like that. So I think it's, and I'm gonna say that with an asterisk right now, because all the details, right, still aren't out, but I believe that it's just gonna follow the same path that it is right now, accountability path. But I could be wrong.
Is the, social security for military people going to be in any bills this year as far as not paying
Pension?
Well, there's-
taxes
It's already been,
on
There's
Social Security
two,
or-
there's both a bill to exempt, that I've seen to exempt social security from state taxation and military pensions and survivor benefit pensions from taxation. I, was one of the 4 co-sponsors, the originators of that bill, and I presented that yesterday in House Ways and Means, which is one of our money committees, kicked that off, and then the Adjutant General, the Deputy Adjutant General were there to testify on it, as well as a couple of veterans organizations on the economic impact of that, why it makes sense from a workforce development perspective, why it makes sense on some moral levels, etc. And to give you a gauge, that particular bill this year had 75 sponsors in the House out of 150, so exactly 50%. And then after the fact, we found there were a couple of people that didn't get an opportunity, so we feel we have safely over more than 50% in the House. And then the sister bill from the Senate had 20, they had the same bill, essentially the same bill in the Senate, had 21 of the 30 senators sign it, so way over 50%.
Keep my fingers crossed.
And then the governor, this year re-highlighted in his budget address that that's an important, thing for him. But there is also a bill out there, and I'm not integral in that one, but to possibly exempt Social Security from taxation, state taxation as well.
Keep my fingers crossed for the military.
Is there gonna be a cap on that? Your income cap?
No, the one, because currently there's for veterans and survivors, in the way it works, there's it's a $10,000 exemption if you make under a certain amount, but it once you do the math and the numbers, if you do any level of work and you're receiving that pension, you're gonna get nothing. So it's yeah, I probably shouldn't say it, but I will, because it's just the way I feel. I'm pretty honest usually. Is that bill came out, it was kind of a joke. I mean, basically, it didn't accomplish anything. It was a feel good, like we did something for veterans, but it didn't really, because it probably impacts less than 5% of the people that are eligible. And I'm throwing a number out there, I could be wrong, but it doesn't impact many people.
And it was an either or, so you could take it for Social Security or
correct,
military.
whichever is your greater, yeah.
Couldn't take both.
So we're one of, it depends the kind of numbers you look at on the internet, but we're one of, at least there's well into the 30s of the 50 states that give a full exemption, and then there's around 10, because it's constantly evolving. Some have migrated from partials to fulls. It's somewhere mid-30s on full and 10-ish that have a partial. But we're still one of the bottom feeders on that one. And so I think this is a year that there's an appetite for it. It does associated with a revenue shift of 3.9 million, but
By shift, you mean reduction.
correct.
It's an expenditure.
Yeah, yep. So that all has to be looked at when you get into building the budget, you know, do you, don't you, I mean, it's all a component of it. So we'll see.
Yes, ma'am.
Back to the education funding proposal. What's the impact on buildings, school facilities? Milton has a crisis.
Yes, that is about every single day. I was actually on the school construction task force, school construction working group, so I'm right in the middle of all that. We do have a bill coming out. The problem with that is that we don't really know how that's gonna fit into everything that we're talking about now. So that's kind of what we're trying to figure out, how it's going to play a part of this new proposal in some aspect. We've got to figure out how it actually fits in there. Because Vermont is in a crisis. It's $6 billion if we wanted to actually invest into schools to actually get them to where they need to be. But how it's going to fit into this whole aspect of everything, that's to be determined, and definitely a conversation that we're having. Yes.
I'm curious what bills each of you have initiated. It's one thing to co-sign on someone else's bill, but what bills have you physically called Ledge Council and said, one of my constituents would like this drafted?
I can start. I've got several bills. I've got a bill. Two of them I've introduced in the past. One of them is for homeschooling, to allow families that have a homeschool student, for each student, a $1,000 tax deduction to pay for some of the costs of actually, I mean, it's very minimal costs, payback of the costs that are incurring for the $1,000. The other one is a co-lead sponsor, myself and Casey Toof up in St. Albans, homeschooling again, but to figure out a way that driver's ed can be given to facilitated in some way for homeschooling, to not have to go into the public school to do it. And the other ones I have specifically from a constituent here in Milton. I'm introducing a tire extended producer responsibility bill, which would, automotive tires, which would make the producer of the tires responsible for recycling and taking back tires after their useful life. Pros and cons to that. Cons are, price can be just passed right on to the consumer in the price of tires. Pros is Milton gets cleaned up from all the tires that we find laying around every green-up day. Another bill from a constituent is for the dispensing and distribution of drugs with death resulting, to take out, there's a clause in there, there was some minimums, a 2-year minimum put in there, but at the very end is something that we like to do in a lot of bills, and put in a notwithstanding clause, which basically says, you read everything up here, but notwithstanding all that stuff, you could actually do this. So the notwithstanding clause on that basically says that you don't have to do the 2-year minimum, there's not a felony attached. So I'm actually looking at getting rid of that notwithstanding clause, so that there's a felony attached and you have to do a 2-year minimum. This family that contacted me, their son died from an overdose, and the person that dealt the drugs got very minimal sentencing just last week.
Yeah,
So those were-
I'm sorry, a couple, Lee and I co-done with because we're the same district. We had one individual and a local school bus company that you could probably figure out who it is, that, believe it or not, and you probably, well, I shouldn't say believe it or not, I bet you many of you have experienced it, but right now, just I would say the driving of Vermonters, well, no, I'd go through the nation and I was for it. You don't have to drive the interstate for one day to see it, the weaving in traffic, the dangerous things that people are willing to do to make, 30 seconds of their commute quicker or whatever. But anyway, part of that is these people are just blatantly running school buses when their lights are on, and that's horrifying to me. So this gentleman approached us last year. I did a bill, but it didn't get taken up but I'm resubmitting it this year. Or we're submitting, it's coming from Ledge Council, it's in drafting as they call it, to allow the cameras on the buses to pick that plate up and then send the owner of that vehicle a ticket. Now, whether it's your son, daughter, granddaughter, whatever, driving that car, and they send you that ticket, you sort it out. You allowed your car to be borrowed, you sort it out. So, because it's become and talking to multiple school bus drivers in the school bus company that's here in Milton, it's their manager said it's a rampant problem. So there's one. The other one is, I just talked about the military pensions one. Full disclosure, I said it in my testimony yesterday, I would be a benefactor of that, I'll tell you that right up front. But the reason I bring it forward is because I get called all the time by both survivors that are receiving benefits and military pensioners themselves to say, you know, hey, other states are doing it, why aren't we? I beg you to go. So I try to be their voice in Montpelier. I'm not worried about me, I'm worried about them, because a significant number of the men and women that worked beside me and with me in the military could benefit from that.
And it might keep them here in the state rather than moving away.
There's an economic impact.
Can I ask a question, is that just for the National Guard,
No, it's anybody that's a military
Okay,
retiree,
'cause I
regardless of how
I
you
was
achieve
regular
that.
Army.
Yeah, it would,
I was
yes.
never,
Anybody that's a military retired or survivor receiving some component of a military pension.
okay.
Another one is putting in a bill, it's again in drafting, that would, because if any of you pay attention to what's going on in municipalities across the state, volunteerism for all the EMS type roles is down, like a lot of things, unfortunately. So some incentives there is a small tax credit, especially for some of our younger folks that are wanting to get into that, to make it a little bit more enticing for them to do it, to get out and get into those fields and help with that volunteerism. And then, I think as Chris said earlier, a plethora of bills that co-sponsors, others have written that I think are noble or worthy causes. So, but those are some of the ones that Lee and I've got on the table.
Would that be credit for fire and EMS or only EMS?
I'm sorry, say that
The
again.
volunteers, for EMS, would that also be for volunteers for the fire department, or would it?
Yeah,
only be
first
rescue?
responders writ large
Okay.
as a whole, generally, yes.
I just put forth the bill. Many of you may know, we had a issue at a sports event with one of our high school students, and that's going to allow some of these smaller schools to get like AEDs and proper, medical personnel there during these events. To Michael's point, I've sponsored a variety of different bills, or co-sponsored a variety of different bills that I think are noble causes. I don't know if I'm getting credit, don't really care, but I'm working very, very closely with the person in our committee on the data privacy bill. That's a big thing about protecting people's data. That's a bipartisan bill, it has bipartisan support, so I'm good.
And then I have a couple by request ones. I've done one of them in the past, and it was a guy here in town had a grandson that was out muzzle loading, and he got caught up in the tree by coy dogs, and he did one shot, didn't do anything, and then he got flustered, couldn't reload the gun. So he wanted me to introduce a bill that would allow for carrying a handgun while you're muzzle loading. And we had a conversation back and forth, and I asked some other folks that are bigger in the hunting scene about, well, can you actually tell the difference if somebody pulls the trigger on a handgun to shoot a deer versus a muzzle loader? And they reassured me, yeah, you can definitely tell the difference. So it's a personal safety thing, because you get one shot with a muzzle loader versus if you have a handgun and you get into that situation. And it worried him about his grandson being out alone in the woods, and so I'm going to be putting forth that bill. And then I got another request from another one of the towns, and it was about making Vermont's colors green and gold. And it came right after UVM won the soccer championship, so that was another request. And then over the past year, I was working with a local company that does towing and auto repair, and it was an abandoned vehicle law that if you don't make contact with the owner within 30 days, you can't then file for an abandoned vehicle title. So it went on for about a year. They held on to this vehicle for a year. They never got credit because they were in contact with the person that had their vehicle left there, and they didn't get credit for that time. The 30 days went by, and then they could no longer apply for that abandoned vehicle because that 30 days went by already. So then it sat there for a year, and they had to go around and figure it out and work with the DMV. So I'm crafting a bill that will give credit to a towing company or auto repair shop for that time spent in contact with somebody that then ghosts them at the end because, you know, if the bill for storage fees or a repair bill or whatever it may be, because an abandoned vehicle title, it gives the title to, say, the repair facility, and they can then turn around and sell the vehicle and recoup the costs that they have involved in this. So it was just something that I found interesting, that a local company was working hard to get somebody their vehicle back to them, and they moved away and stopped responding. So that's another one that I'm gonna go after. And then, just like everybody else here, other worthy causes I've also signed on to: certificate of need, military benefits, things like that.
We're running short on time, but to close this conversation out, as you've heard, we have submitted and have the opportunity to submit bills that are brought forth from constituents. And I think that's the most important reason that we're down there, is to hear from constituents, to get ideas from constituents. We're down there, we don't have all the ideas, we'll never claim to have all the ideas. Sometimes we have good ideas, sometimes we have bad ideas. But hearing from constituents, and people bringing forward stuff to us is really a huge benefit for everybody. This year, we're pretty much closed out with being able to put bills forward just because of the timing, but that doesn't mean that if you have ideas, they shouldn't be brought forward to us, because we can still do committee bills, and there's still avenues to do things without putting in a standalone bill. So please reach out to us with ideas, concerns. That's why we're here.
Have you heard, has anyone heard, how many bills are anticipated to come out? I mean, in the past, they've been near 1,000.
Yeah.
That many this
We're over
time?
100
No,
right
I think
now. We're over 100.
people, we're over 100. I'm gonna guess we're gonna land a little over 200 would be my guess. There's still a fair amount of drafting this session.
Seems like less this session than there has
Yes,
been.
that, however, yes, exactly. I think people have looked back, because correct, we did almost 1,000 bills in the House were submitted in the last biennium over the 2 years of the last cycle, and that's too many.
We're over 100.
Because you end up devaluing a lot of things of importance, and I hate to use the words wasting time, but sometimes you can end up wasting valuable committee time on bills that.
And there's a money value for each one.
Each bill they put $1,000 of value to, so there was $1 million spent on crafting legislative council doing bills last year to be blunt.
And most of them go nowhere.
And I think we ended up passing in the House 200-ish, a little over 200 I think last year. So only a quarter-ish of those even got made actionable, so.
We have,
So I think people are being more mindful and thoughtful about what they're putting in this time, and I think that's good from the taxpayers' perspective as well.
Yeah, we have, like, you hear the term left on the wall. We literally they're stuck on a wall, and they literally get left there, the cards do. And I think in the education committee, most of the bills that we had come in are not going to be taken up. There might be a few because of just the work we have ahead with all the bigger stuff that we have. But there is the cell phone bill out there, if anybody's heard about it yet, to ban cell phones from bell to bell, 8 to 3 in public schools, and there's a huge benefit to that.
Does that bill have a lot of support? Does that bill have a lot of support?
It's got a lot of support, but there's also a lot of parents who are not on board with it. So it's going to be a lot of conversation. So I see the benefit.
Yes.
Throw that out there. That's my little.
We lived without them.
Yes,
Exactly.
Yeah. Remember the rotary phones?
And that also entails social media, not allowing schools to use social media to contact, or not requiring students to have to use social media in any aspect. And that, to me, that's a huge part of the bill. I have my feelings about social media, even though I'm probably addicted to it and use it way too often, but it's not a great thing. So.
Is there a way they could block social media in the schools, like, or tell them to block it anyway, or?
in schools, they have filters, they have ways, oh yeah, you can filter out a lot of stuff.
First of all, thank you guys all for representing us, and you find now that the supermajority is no longer a supermajority, that you're being listened to better, that your voices are now heard more with
Yeah,
more
I
of an
actually,
even slate?
quite honestly, in my committee last year, I felt like that anyways, when we were in the committee room. I think most of the time in the committee rooms, things are really cordial and people are really trying to work hard together. Sometimes when you get out on the floor, things separate a little bit. But with the education reform that's going on right now, I think within our committee, we're doing really well. We're starting to hear from some outside groups, and so now we're starting to get the pressure on, so everybody's getting a little stressed out. But for the most part, yeah, I mean, I've always felt like I've been able to work really well with anybody that's down there. To a certain point, there's always no's. Everybody's always got a hard no that they're not gonna let go.
Right.
And I've got them, other people have them, so that's when you have to start talking and figure it out.
I feel the same way, like in commerce and economic development, you know, there's 4 Republicans, 7 Democrats, and we really leave our letters at the door. I mean, in those conversations where it's all about helping Vermonters, it's all about how can we help the people.
Compared to previous years, yes, I think things have changed. People have said hello that haven't said hello for 3 years, and they finally did this year. So.
Good. To change the subject a little bit, is that fuel, clean fuel tax, is that gonna be dead? Is that pretty much dead?
Unknown.
Yeah. That hasn't even really been talked about down there. We do have to have it, it will come up for a vote, it has to come up for a vote at some point. I thought it was supposed to be in January, but that's.
Yeah.
That is serious, because that's gonna hurt a lot of people.
Oh, I mean, yeah, I think there'll have to be some big conversations on that, and some information's come out where the Public Utility Commission is looking at it like that's probably not the right model even for Vermont, so there'll be some discussions.
I heard one thing, somebody said, well, we gotta increase to just a regular fuel tax, I heard that someplace, but just leave it alone. I mean, you know, trying to make Vermont so-called like a carbon-free state, that's like creating a no-pee zone in the swimming pool.
But the topic will come up, so we will discuss that.
But aren't we close to that anyway? Vermont, I mean.
Vermont does a really good job, I mean.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, Vermont's already over 90% efficient.
That's what but that's my point.
So there is some information that I'll put out in my update that I put around. You'll have access to that 25-page proposal that just came out from the Agency of Education about the foundation form. There's a lot of great information in there. It'll give you really good detail, as well as the slide deck that they shared with us real straight. So I'll have that out there so everybody can look at it. It's my goal to make sure you guys all have the same information that I have, and we can try to figure this whole mess out together, because it's not gonna be, I mean, it is gonna be 150 or 180 people down in that state house doing it, but it's really gonna be all of us trying to figure out together what's gonna work for Vermont.
Yeah, I think with that, I think we have to kind of get things put back into shape, as we have a hard have to be out of here by 11.
By 11, but, you know, if anybody wants to have sidebar conversations, that's why we're gonna be here, and we can chat still. Appreciate everybody coming, this is a really good forum. I felt really comfortable.
Thank you.
Really, and for listening.
You bet.
It's greatly appreciated.
Of course.